Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us on today's webinar, the fourth webinar of this year's SIS series of webinars. Today's webinar is titled Working with IS Web. Thank you all for joining us today. We will begin on time today as we do have a full webinar to deliver, and we will kick off immediately and on time. Today, our presenters are Jessica Travis, a featured presenter from American Airlines, the manager of Interline Settlement and Audit, along with our IATA colleagues, Samuel Diano Brown and Nina Osmani, as part of the industry e-invoicing teams here in IATA. My name is Vivek Pandit. I am also a member of the industry e-invoicing team here in IATA, Montreal, and we are pleased to offer this webinar as a continued part of our support to the industry during these challenging times. So without further ado, we will kick off. Just as normal, a couple legal reminders and important notes before we take off. Participants are reminded that live streaming of this webinar to other parties that are not in attendance is not permitted, except as indicated by and with the express permission and knowledge of IATA. Unauthorized recording of this meeting is also prohibited, and IATA will record this webinar and share the link afterwards to all members of the group, as well as it will be posted on the SIS website under the webinars webpage. One more important note for this particular webinar today: portions of this webinar have been pre-recorded to optimize the best use of time and demonstrations for everyone in today's audience. If you do have difficulty viewing or listening to any parts of the pre-recorded content, we recommend that you please disable any security or firewall settings, including VPNs, that may be preventing you from seeing the audio, from listening to the audio and viewing the visual of the content on today's webinar. After you disable any security firewall settings, please try disconnecting and rejoining the webinar as needed. As a reminder, of course, if you are unsuccessful to view the content today due to any issues, the webinar will be posted on the SIS webinars webpage as soon as next week for everyone to view and follow up with. So just to cover the agenda items, high-level agenda items you would have also received in the invitation email for today's webinar subject matter. We will be covering invoice creation by billing category, particularly IS Web. File submissions, we will give some hints to, but that will be covered in a future webinar in detail. Invoice submission features, including future submissions, supporting documents, and file validation controls, using the processing dashboard to manage receivables, working with your payable invoices, and lastly, billing history and correspondence modules. As always, we invite you to enter your questions in the questions box on the tool. Feel free to enter your questions at any time throughout the webinar. We will do our best to answer the questions, time permitting, at the end of the webinar. Otherwise, we will distribute the question and answer report after the webinar is complete. So to kick off today, we'd like to introduce our first guest speaker for today's webinar, Jessica Travis, who is the manager of Interline Settlement and Audit at American Airlines, who will take us through the first part of today's webinar. Jessica?
Thank you, Vivek. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Jessica Travis, and I work for American Airlines supporting our passenger interline settlement and audit group. Thank you for the opportunity to share our knowledge of the SIS application and a few of our best practices. I'll use my time to discuss and demonstrate the submission features supported by the application and how invoices are created. I will begin with invoice submission features, as these will be referenced while discussing invoice creation by billing category. All right, let's get started. The invoice submission features are located under Profile and User Management tab, Manage Member Profile. These features allow you, the user, to set up the profiles for your billing categories to best suit your business processes. For this webinar, we'll review future submissions, supporting document types, and file validation controls. There are many other features, and they're located in ISPG Chapter 7, which is linked within the webinar material. There are several submission features that we're going to highlight during our demonstration. The first is the validations feature. Our Online corrections allowed. For those who have the capability, SIS allows online corrections of validation errors. Since this is optional, we will not discuss this in detail. You can define additional supporting document file types, and you can allow for future billing submissions up to 4 periods in advance. This is particularly helpful for managing fixed amount contract invoices and recurring billings. So we'll provide more detail about these submission features in our next section, invoice creation by billing category, and during the demonstration portion of the section. So let's transition to that second topic, invoice creation by billing category. Within the SIS application, there are 4 billing categories: passenger, cargo, miscellaneous, and UATP. During this webinar, we will not demonstrate UATP as those invoices are issued on behalf of the airlines. The reference material for our presentation today is located chapters 3 through 6 of the ISPG, and a link will be provided when the webinar materials are shared on the SIS website. So let's discuss billing categories and their associated invoice types. The passenger category is used for passenger-related billings and identified by source codes. A complete list of the passenger billing source codes is located in the RAM, Chapter A9, Attachment G. The SIS application supports sample and non-sample prime billings, rejection memos, billing memos, and credit memos. The cargo category is used for cargo-related billings, and the transactions are identified by transaction type and allows for 2 methods of billing: charge collect or prepaid airway bills. Billing methods and transaction types are defined in RAM chapters 5 through 8. SIS supports prime billings, rejection memos, and credit memos for cargo settlement. The miscellaneous category is used for non-transportation billings and are identified by invoice types. These types are original, rejection, and correspondence invoices, along with credit notes. RAM Chapter 813 defines miscellaneous billing procedures. Now that we've briefly reviewed the billing categories, let's review the basic steps to create an invoice with ISWeb. All billing categories follow the same steps. First, an invoice header is created. The form looks a bit different for each category, however the fields are common. 2 important parts of the invoice header are the currency of listing and the currency of billing. These must be assigned correctly. So let me briefly define those. The currency of listing is the currency that the service or good was rendered, and the currency of billing is the currency in which the transaction is settled. So you fill out the remainder of the required fields in the invoice header, and upon completion, your next step is to create the capture or listing. Within the capture listing, each billing category is customized, so the billing airline can provide sufficient detail to enable the airline debited to identify the charge. During the demonstration, I'll show you a few of the category features. With all of the invoice information entered, the user must then validate that invoice information is correct and meets the requirements of the SIS application for submission. If required, information is missing or in incorrect format, the user will get an error message detailing what is required to correct. The user has an opportunity to correct the error and validate all information has been entered properly. Successful validation allows the user to then submit the invoice. An invoice must be submitted prior to the submission deadline to be included in the period billing. Once the invoice is submitted, it cannot be modified or deleted. So now that we've learned a little bit of how to create invoices through ISWeb, let's briefly review how to create an invoice through file upload. SIS offers invoice creation with several listings through file upload. We are only mentioning this topic during this webinar as this feature will be covered in detail in a future webinar. The upload file formats are defined in the ISPG, and the link will be provided when the webinar materials are placed on the SIS website. One thing to note is that the file name must be the same as the zipped folder that you are uploading. Based on the file naming convention, the SIS application identifies the billing category. So let's go now into SIS and walk through an example. So I'm going to exit the PowerPoint presentation, and I am going to log into a SIS database, a SIS test database. So all of the information in this test database is made up, and any information that I enter is not intended to reflect any specific airline. All right. Oops, I must have typed it incorrectly. I apologize. We'll get this correct here. So once we're in, we come into the home page. And I apparently was logged on to 2 sessions, but that's okay. So we come into the home page. And the home page has the upcoming milestones, which are your clearinghouse deadlines on your left-hand side, and some important announcements from SIS. To start, I'd like to show you where the submission features are located. We talked about these being located in the Profile and User Management tab, Manage Member Profile. When we get into the Manage Member Profile, you'll notice that there are several tabs. We're going to talk about the invoice submission features, which are located on the Passenger, Cargo, and Miscellaneous tabs. As we click through them, you're going to notice that all the same features are available for each billing category. They're just laid out differently in the application, and the features work the same way for each. So while we're here in Passenger, let's talk about rejection on validation failure and allow resubmission of failed invoices, these 2 features here. The validation is an important step allowing the user to make corrections. 2 important validation features, these here, rejection on validation failure and allow resubmission of failed invoices, are what I want to address. These features allow you, the end user, to decide how SIS validates your files and how you correct errors. The reject file and error feature, so if we select reject file and error, will fail the submission at file level. For instance, there are 10 invoices contained within the file, and 1 does not meet validation requirements. The file fails validation along with the 1 invoice. The other 9 invoices are placed on hold until the file or invoice error is corrected. The user must then upload a new file with a new name after the error is corrected. So before we talk about reject invoice and error, let's talk about allow resubmission of failed invoices. If this box is checked in the billing category profile like it is here, then the invoices in the new file do not need to be renamed. However, if this box is unchecked, when uploading your new corrected file, the invoices will need to be renamed. If not, you'll receive another validation error. This feature works the same way for reject invoice and error. So using our previous example of the file containing 10 invoices, let's discuss the scenario of reject invoice and error. The file is uploaded and one of the 10 invoices contains an error. The 1 invoice fails validation and the file with the other 9 invoices will pass validation and move on to submission. The 1 failed invoice will need to be corrected and can be included in another file for resubmission. So just to reiterate, the invoice will need to be changed, the invoice name will need to be changed if allow resubmission field invoices is not activated. So I've clicked through in the Passenger and I've made some changes. If you do make changes and you have the authorization to do so, once you make that change, we'll put it back, we'll change it to reject invoice and error and allow resubmission of failed invoices. You must scroll to the bottom and save your Passenger details. Okay, those details will then save and you can move on. So let's take a look at what Cargo and Miscellaneous look like. Cargo we have set up for reject file and error, online correction allowed, and their additional supporting documents are a .docx. And Miscellaneous, we have set up for reject invoice and error. We do not allow resubmission of failed invoices, but we do allow future billing submissions allowed. And we talked a little bit about that, and we can allow future billing submissions for up to 4 periods in advance. All right, now that we've reviewed some of the profile information that we have for file validation and file submission, let's go and create a passenger prime billing. And for purposes of our demonstration, let's create a non-sampling invoice. Anytime you see a blue box, you can use the down arrow and it will show you your available options to select. So anytime within the SIS application, you can use that. For this purposes, I'm going to select billing member 777 test airline 2. I'm going to enter my invoice number. Invoice 3, let's try that. Our invoice date, our billing year, month, and period. And for this, we're going to keep it current. And then we're going to select that currency of listing. And I'm going to select Canadian dollars. And our currency of billing is USD. You can see that the listing and evaluation to billing rate automatically populates when they are different. And remember, the currency of listing is the currency in which the good or service was rendered. All right, now that we've entered our fields, let's save our invoice header. And as this header saves, you'll see now that it's saved, invoice header created successfully, you'll see that the information we put in is there, and now it's time for us to add our listing detail. For this demonstration, we're going to do a prime capture. And this would be a prime coupon that we're billing in passenger. Once again, we have a blue drop-down box. I'm going to select one for lifted coupons. Batch number 1, sequence 1, my issuing airline auto-populates. Select the relevant coupon, and let's enter our 10-digit coupon. Check digit auto-populates. And then we enter our coupon gross value. Let's enter our coupon gross value as $200. And remember, the coupon gross value is in the currency of listing, so it's 200 Canadian dollars. At this time, we have several deductions we can add and taxes. The deductions must be an amount less than 0 in order for the net amount to calculate properly. So for demonstration purposes, let's add minus 4% or 0.4% for ISC. And then let's add one tax. And you add a tax by clicking the tax breakdown and entering in your tax codes with the amount. You can continue to do so until all of your tax codes are entered. We'll enter one and we'll close. With this, we have the currency adjustment indicator. It defaults to USD unless otherwise listed in the RAM. For the purpose of the demonstration, like I said, this is a test database, so our electronic settlement and authorization code didn't auto-populate. And if it doesn't auto-populate, then it's always best practice to put that information in there. So we'll put a number in for that. Now it looks like we've met all of our required fields because the required fields are denoted by a little red asterisk. So you can see that. So let's save and go back to the overview. Okay, we got an error here. It says, please review and correct the highlighted fields. And here are the highlighted fields. Well, what's that error? Well, these highlighted fields is required for source code 1, 14, and 31. So sometimes within the SIS application, not all the required fields have the asterisk denoted. However, the system is set up for required fields depending on your source code and other required fields. So when that happens, it's no big deal. We just enter our flight number, our flight date, our from airport. We'll go from Phoenix and let's go to London. And then it looks like we've entered all the rest of the required information. At this time, you can also enter any supporting attachment that you have. If you don't have the supporting attachment ready, that's okay. You can save because you can enter an attachment anytime after creation of the invoice through Receivables Manage Invoice. So you would go into Receivables Manage Invoice and upload your document. You can do that anytime after the invoice has created, after it's been validated and submitted, and prior to the period closing, and up to 2 days after the period closing. So those timelines are listed on the home page in the clearinghouse deadlines. It'll be the supporting document submission deadline. So with that being discussed, let's talk about, we have 3 different ways to save. Save and add new, save and duplicate, or save and go back to overview. Save and add new would be to add another coupon. Save and duplicate would be to duplicate this coupon if all the information was the same. And save and back to overview. So in order so we can review other features, let's go to save and back to overview. And once this invoice saves, our next step, because we've done the header, now we've done the listing, our next step is to validate and submit. One of the best practices that we use at American Airlines is segregation of duties. And so SIS allows you to validate your own and submit your own invoice. However, we don't like to do that in case someone's made an error. So once we get to this, the prime billing record was created successfully. We can continue to add or we'll go back. So we don't want to add anymore. Let's go back. At this time, we're going to be able to validate. But I don't want to be able to validate my own submission. So once this comes up, I'm not going to validate the invoice from here where it's allowing me to. I'm going to pretend like I'm a different person and I'm going to go in and I'm going to check Jessica Travis's work to validate it. So you would go to Passenger, Receivables, Manage Invoice. And you know what? I misspoke earlier with the attachments. So let me show you that prior to me going to that. When you're at Passenger, Receivables, to attach after the invoice has been validated and submitted, you go to Passenger, Receivables, Manage Supporting Documents. I apologize, I said Manage Invoice. So for the attachment, it's Manage Supporting Documents. All right, I apologize for that once again, but let's go through and validate and submit as if I didn't create the invoice. You can now see the invoice that we just created. I've gone in and I can edit and make any changes that I need to change in case I made a mistake. And then here you click the green button to validate. We want to validate this record. And it says that invoice was successfully validated. Now, I, as a validator, don't have the approval to issue, to bill for funds over $100. So we need another person to come in and submit the invoice. So that person can go in and click on the edit and look at all the details and ensure it's correct. Then they can click this button and then submit the selected invoice. You can set up each user's permissions through the profile and user management for your business area. All right, so that concludes our passenger prime invoice. Now I would like to walk through a miscellaneous future billing credit note to demonstrate some of the other features. Same with passenger, let's bill the same member. And then let's create our credit note number. We can do note, demo 9, our credit date, and our charge category. When selecting a charge category in miscellaneous, it's important to select the proper charge category and code that you are billing for. This enables you to provide enough detail so the airline being debited can ensure and validate the charge. Okay, for a complete list of these charge codes and charge category mappings, it's located in the ISPG. So for purposes of the demonstration, let's select finance. Our billing location is the same. And let's talk a little bit about the settlement method. I didn't mention this during passenger. However, there are different ways that you can settle based on how you're contractually set up with your partner airlines or partner businesses. We're going to select ICH here, and we had note we're going to do this as a future submission. So we're going to submit this in June period 2. For miscellaneous, The currency of billing is defined like the currency of listing. So it's the currency in which the good or service was rendered. So let's keep it consistent and select the Canadian dollar. Our currency of clearing is defined as the currency of billing, which is the currency in which it is settled. All right, you can see that the exchange rate auto-populates. So it looks like we've identified everything we need. So let's save this credit note header like we did with passenger. And just please note, so see, I incorrectly entered a credit note, so I was noted that I had a duplicate invoice found. So let's do demo 1. All right, and resave. So as is the saving, it's the same thing with a cargo invoice or credit note. We're just, for purposes of timing, we're just not going to demonstrate that today. Okay. And it looks like it's going to go through. It absolutely did. So now let's enter our first line item. With our charge category finance, you'll see the charge code. Let's pick miscellaneous. Our required field is a location. Our required field is a description. Put in miscellaneous finance charge. Our service start date, our service end date. Quantity is dictated by your unit of measurement. And for this, we will stick with each and we will put in $450. The scaling factor, you can then enter your tax, your VAT, any additional deductions or charges, just like we did within passenger. So now let's go in and save this. All right, and it's going to save. And then we're going to come to the spot where we can validate. And for purposes of time, I won't demonstrate another segregation of duties, but we'll just validate right here as if we had that authority. So we look, everything looks right to us. We say back. And now we can validate this credit note. Everything looks right to us. We're going to validate. Uh-oh, our validation failed. There's a problem. So it loads the validation error. It says amount in the credit note cannot be positive. So that's something to note within the system. I've talked about our invoice charges or our invoice deductions need to be less than 0. Anytime you're entering through the credit note system, the amount must be less than 0. So let's go in and correct this mistake. Let me click here on the pencil. And our listing detail pops back up, our line item. Let's add our minus sign to have it be less than 0. Save our item. And then we will go back and we will validate and submit the invoice. Right, here's our listing detail. It's now correct. We didn't get any validation error. Let's see if we get a validation error this time to make sure everything is correct. All right, it was successfully validated. Now we have the option to submit, and we submit our credit note. Okay. So please note that once it passes validation, if you've submitted it, you can't delete it. All right. So now we've demonstrated 2 of the billing category invoice creations through IS Web, and we've reviewed some of the invoice submission features available through Profile and User Management. I hope that these demonstrations were useful and you've learned something with them. So I'm going to exit the SIS application and we're going to go through one final slide for me, which is things to remember. All right. Things to remember: common errors, data entry errors, missing the clearinghouse and SIS deadlines, forgetting to attach documents, and your member profile settings. Make sure they're correct for your business procedures. Some of the best practices that we've discussed are segregation of duties internally, and you can set that up through your user permissions. Ensuring that your master data is updated regularly. This reduces validation errors. Subscribing to optional services that are good for audit and compliance, using the documentation that's already out there. So remember, our goal as invoicing professionals is to reduce rejections and deliver invoices to the billed carrier that they can easily understand. So thank you for your time, and we're now going to check your knowledge with our first poll question. So at what point during the invoice creation process can a supporting document be attached? Together with the billing file upload, during prime billing memo, rejection memo, credit memo capture, after validation and submission, or up to 2 days after the period closure as per the SIS and clearinghouse calendar, or all of the above. Please submit your answers in the poll online, and next up is my colleague Sam to walk you through the processing dashboard. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jessica. At this time, we invite everyone to submit their responses on the poll. On your screen, you should be able to see the poll question that was asked by Jessica. At what point during the invoice creation process can you submit supporting documents? Please enter your responses based on your knowledge and your experience so far, as well as the content shared on today's presentation. We'll just give you a few seconds to enter your responses. Thank you. Thank you all. Please continue entering your responses. We see them coming in. Please go ahead and plug in what you think is the correct answer to the question: at what point during the invoice creation process can you attach supporting documents? All right. So with that, we will close the poll. We just have over 50% of you voting in. So thank you very much. We will close this poll at this time. And just to give the correct answer is E, all of the above. So 62% of you would have gotten it correct. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge areas with us. Please remember that supporting documents can be attached at any time during these stages of the invoice creation process. Further information can be found in the ISPG as needed. So with that, we will continue with the second portion of the webinar. Our colleague Sam will take us through the processing dashboard.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and welcome everyone who is tuned into the webinar. My name is Samuel Daniel Brown. I am an e-invoicing analyst at IATA on the SIS team, and I will be walking us through the next part of the webinar, the processing dashboard. So the processing dashboard is a great tool to manage all created receivable invoices and credit notes only. The different sections we can interact with are the invoice status, billing file status, and the document package status. There are a few key points I'd like to discuss prior to a demo of interacting with the dashboard. So first, we're going to look at the color codes. We see on the processing dashboard there are 3 colors: green, yellow, and red. Green can mean ready for billing, claimed, presented. Yellow can mean open / ready for submission. And red can mean validation error, error correctable, or error non-correctable. Now, for a more descriptive breakdowns of the colors per column, I will not be going into depth in this webinar, as we see on this screen, because this will be available for download. The webinar will be available for download when it's eventually uploaded, and you may read this at your own pace. And as a reminder, any other slide at your own pace. And the last point I want to convey prior to the demo is future submissions. So here we see the SIS calendar, which is available for download on SIS, and highlighted here in red is the date when future submissions are open. This opens the 25th of each month for the following billing periods of the next month. So we can see in the screenshot on the processing dashboard, when searched at a future period, you can see future invoices. So let's do a demo. Let's jump into SIS. I'm going to be closing this PowerPoint and I'm going to open up SIS so we can interact with the processing dashboard. So here is SIS. So when you log in, this is the home page, and the pathway to get to the processing dashboard is we look on top, we go to reports, and the first one is going to say processing dashboard. Give it a click. Once it loads up, it opens up as it should. Right here, the default being quick search and current, and tab being here invoice status. So we went over the pathway, and now here we can manage all created receivable invoices. And as we just saw, Jessica created invoice, we can find both the invoice and interact with the invoice here. So going from top of the screen to the bottom of the screen, we start with the 3 different tabs: the invoice status, billing file status, and the document package status. Then we see the search criteria, which is quick search and detailed search, and the billing period, which is current and previous. Current being the current period you are in, and previous being the period directly before the one you're currently in, not all periods before the current. So let's jump into the detailed search, and we can interact with a couple of these drop downs. So here we can see the clearance year, the clearance month, and the period. And you can make this as niche as you like after the mandatory fields are put in. You can do a particular billed member. You can choose a clearance type if you want to look at your ICH, ACH, bilaterals, etc. A particular billing category depends if you do segregation of duties and you're only involved in passenger or miscellaneous, etc. If you're looking for a particular invoice, you can search that. The invoice status, whether you're looking for invoices that have failed or those that are ready for submission, those that are pending or those that are complete. And you can look at the submission method, whether it be XML or IDEC. Anything else? So now those are done, we can see the different columns that an invoice that appears. So now currently we're searching 2021 May period 3. These are all the invoices. So mine is not so finite, so it has all the invoices in this period. So scrolling down, we look at the different columns available, but I would like to bring your attention to, I guess, some of the big ones: the SMI, the billing and billed category, the invoice status, invoice number. But over here on the right, we take a look at the color nodes again. So what we see here is the red, the green, and the yellow. In addition to these, more on the bottom of the screen, we see the status key with failed, pending, successful complete, and 2 other ones we haven't looked over: suspended member and late submission. Now, if you interact with a suspended member, it will appear on this column, suspended/late submitted. And again, if an invoice is marked for late submission, it will appear here. Now, looking at these, so how do we get an invoice into late submission? This is where we look at these 4 buttons at the bottom. You have mark for late submission, increment billing period, download, and delete. So an invoice can be marked for late submission during the late submission window. This can be found on the ICH/SIS calendar, which we got to see before in the PowerPoint. And to mark for late submission when the window is open, you simply select the invoice which you would like to submit, and then click mark for late submission. Now, let's say it's past the late submission window and there's still an invoice that has failed, which you'd like to try again. What you can do is, once done, you could click increment billing period. So it would push the invoice to the next billing period that you were not able to upload during the current and the late submission window. Following that is the download button. And this download button, you can download an Excel sheet that will have all the data on the dashboard. As an example, I'll do a quick download. You have the Excel sheet. Once open, you can see and interact all of the invoices on the present dashboard. So mine has May P3 because that's the section I have now. And here are all the erroneous invoices on the dashboard that we created for this webinar. And the last point that we can see here is the delete button. So you, let's say you have a failed invoice, and as we can see here, we have one. and you would like to resubmit the invoice without having the duplicate invoice error, you can simply delete it from the dashboard and then try again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete this invoice. So I have it selected. I know it's failed validation due to the color node, and I click delete. Are you sure you want to delete? Yes. Here I have an error saying individual invoice cannot be deleted. File will have to be deleted. Thus, that segues into the next part, the next tab, the billing file status. Here, there's also files that have been successfully validated and those who have failed an error. So while the notation is similar at the bottom like the previous, the deleting would be quite similar as well. So I would select and I would delete. It has been processed correctly and the file has been deleted. Now, I won't go too much into the final tab, which again follows mostly the other two tabs in generic structure. The document package status. The document package option in SIS facilitates exchange of documents for members to pass on a package which contains individual documents in different formats using the SIS infrastructure to another member. I won't dive into this because there's more information of this on chapter 5.9 of the ISPG. Now, returning to PowerPoint, I'd like to start it up again. And just to go into the last little bit, we take a look at the concluding remarks. So a couple of things to remember. Manage receivable invoices and credit notes only in the processing dashboard. So you will not have payables. And again, it's a great tool to check for invoice errors, their status, take any correction action before the end of each billing period. Now we move on to the second poll, which concludes this part of the processing dashboard. So the question being, which of the below responses personally correlates to the following statement? I use the SIS processing dashboard to view and manage my receivable invoices in SIS. 1, daily, 2, weekly, 3, monthly, and 4, not often. This concludes my part of the processing dashboard, and I'll have Vivek move on to the next part.
Thank you, Sam. At this point, you will be able to submit your responses to the poll question that Sam asked. I use the processing dashboard. How often? Please enter your responses. How often do you use the processing dashboard to manage your receivable invoices? Please go ahead and enter your responses now so we have an understanding of how you interact with this module in SIS. We're going to give you a few seconds. We're seeing your votes coming in. Thank you. Please go ahead, continue submitting your responses. On the tool itself, not on the questions box, but on the actual screen, you will see the responses to click and enter. Perfect. We're just over 50% of everyone responding. Please go ahead and continue responding. Just a few more seconds. Okay. Thank you all very much. And with that, we will close this poll. So, according to the audience, most of you all would review your processing dashboard on a weekly basis. This is, in fact, good practice. Thank you for sharing your responses in this regard, and we do encourage you to continue monitoring and correcting your receivable invoices in the processing dashboard as regularly as you can. And with that, we will continue into the other section of our webinar today. Nina, our colleague, will take us through the payables, managing payables section of SIS.
Thank you, Jessica. And now my name is Nina Osmani, and I will guide you through today to working with your payable invoices in SIS. We'll see how to manage and find your payable invoices by billing category, by invoice number, and how you can find your output files after the period closure, your OAR files that will include the invoice PDF, listing, supporting documents, or your output ISXML, IS, IDAC files that contain payable invoices for the data automation of your systems. So when working with payable invoices, you can find them by billing category. So you can go to SIS passenger payable invoice search as shown here. The same you can do for SIS cargo payable invoices. And when you have an invoice number that you want to search, you can search it in the search engine that you will see on the right side of the screen. Finally, when working with payable invoices, you can also find your payable output files. So you can go to SIS, General File Management Download File, and from there you can download your output files. We will see in detail the output files in the demo. If you don't agree with one of the payable invoices that you have received, you can initiate a rejection in ISWeb. So you can initiate it for all the billing categories. For this webinar, we will do a rejection demo for the passenger billing category, and you can initiate it by going to View. For the miscellaneous, you can initiate it by clicking on the rejection icon that you will see, that you are now seeing in the screen. Finally, the same concept applies when you want to reject via file, and this will be a submission via file, as Jessica showed you before, in the general file management upload file. And you can upload the files, and the specification of the IDEC and IXML file are indicated in the ISPG package. For the sake of this webinar, we will only show you how to start a rejection via ISWeb, but stay tuned for a subsequent invitation on another webinar where we will show you how to upload a rejection via file. Now, let's go to the demo that we have prepared today for you in ISWeb. So here we are in ISWeb. This is where you will see your passenger payable invoice search. So you would go to passenger payable invoice search. The system will immediately show you the latest billing period according to the calendar, and it will show you all the invoices, all your payable invoices. If you want to see view any invoice, you will click on the view button, and the system will show you that invoice. So as you see here in the invoice search that I have, you will see the header details, the source code, and everything related to the information in that payable invoice. If you want to download the PDF document, you download it by clicking on the PDF icon, and the system will download the invoice. And this is how this non-sampling passenger invoice looks like when you download it. Furthermore, if you want to have the whole zip document, which will include the PDF document, the listing report, the memos, and supporting documents that the other member might have sent with this payable invoice, you can select all the documents, and you can download the invoice zip. This, the system will generate a zip file and will be sent to you via email. Soon we will receive the email icon here, and we will see that the system sends it to your email, and you will be able to download zip file. Now that we have seen how you can search your payables in Passenger, we will go and show you how you can search your payable invoices for the bill category miscellaneous. Let me remind you here is the email that we received for the zip document to be downloaded. So let me tell you that before going to miscellaneous, the same process applies if you want to see your cargo payables. Now that we are in the miscellaneous payable invoice document search, as you can see here, we have 2 invoices for this period. In miscellaneous, the search is slightly different because you have to do the search manually. So you will change the periods manually. You can also filter the search by transaction type, by billing member, by charge category, SMI, etc. As you see here, also the miscellaneous has an icon to view the invoice. Once you click it, you will see here, you will see the invoice inside. So this is the invoice header, and this is the line item. And when you click on the line item, you will see the line item plus the line item detail. So these are all the levels of the miscellaneous invoice. Additionally, you can also see the PDF document by downloading it. As you can see here, this is the PDF document that was downloaded from SIS. And you can see an additional icon, which is the listing. The listing document can be sent to you via SIS in PDF format, but if you choose it, if you enable it in your member profile, you can also receive it in CSV format. And also, it is important to see all the attachments that you might have received for this invoice by the billing member. Additionally, as we saw before, you have the zip document that we'll choose. That is the same concept as we saw before with all the files, listing, and supporting documents. and the rejection button that we will see later. So this is the difference between how to start a rejection process in cargo and passenger. With miscellaneous, you will see the rejection button directly here in this page. So when you click it, you would start a rejection for that specific invoice. Now, lastly, I would like also to show you in how to download the payables. Instead of downloading them one by one, you can download them in an output file from General File Management Download File. As you can see here, you have many options, and you can choose per period. So, for example, let's say that we choose the billing period May 2 to 3, and we want to see the IDEC file of your payables. So this will help you have all the invoices of all your payable invoices in an IDEC outbound file that you can transfer in your systems. So as you see, this will help you a lot with the for your automation purposes. The same you can do with the offline archive files. The offline archive files will help you have all the invoices together with the attachment and the supporting documents with the CSV and everything in a file for each billing period. So once the billing period is over, you can have all these invoices and not download them one by one as we saw from payables in your systems. Now that we have covered the output files of your payables, if there is a payable invoice that you do not agree with and you would like to reject it, you can go to that invoice, and let's say that this is the invoice that you do not agree with. So we can go to the invoice as we showed before. You can view it. Once you view it, you will see that the source code is 1. Therefore, this is a prime listing. So you will click on the prime listing. And when the system will open it, we will give it some time, you will see the header details, the invoice number, the settlement method, and everything. And you will see that the prime billing coupon list will be indicated here. So let's say that you do not, you want to reject it. You would go and open the prime billing coupon. You would see all the information, as you can see here. First of all, you view the information, and once you understand that this was not something that you were charged correctly for, you can go ahead and reject it. So when you reject it, you need to choose that billing coupon, reject. If you have more, you would have more, and you can reject all of them or some of them. Now, this message that you are getting here, no open invoice found, means that the system looked already for any associated existing rejection invoice. In this case, there was no other invoice, rejection invoice, so that you can start with this one. Once you click on it, it will open the invoice header. So it is creating a rejection for this. You name it, you name the rejection, and you can put the currency of the listing. For example, we saw before that Jessica put Canadian. You can even choose the invoice template that you would like for this invoice, and you will save it. So as you can see here, the system found a duplicate invoice because one of the invoices was already named with this number. We apparently ran out of numbers to reject. So the system will immediately search for an invoice with the same name. So now that we put another name to that invoice, we have no problem. So we will put, for example, the batch number here, and then the sequence number, we can put this. And rejection memo number, you can create a rejection memo from your system. So again, it needs to be a rejection that has not been a rejection memo that has not been used before, and the reason code, as Jessica showed you before. If you don't know the reason, you can put it by clicking on the down arrow and finding it in the list that SIS will provide you. In the remarks, please always write as many remarks as possible, because this will help the build member understand the reasons that you are doing this rejection. Once you have filled in all the information, you save it. And now that you have saved it, you will see that the system will create has created the rejection memo data capture. It is saving it. And now that it's saved it, you will see here the rejection memo coupon list. You will click on edit, and you can even open it in a new page so that you have all the information better for you to compare and to see and to go back and make sure that you are putting all the information correctly. So for example, in the bill, if you do not accept the whole amount, but you accept only 50 from this amount, the system will immediately calculate your difference, as you can see here. It will calculate also the, as you can see, the ISC amount and the tax. As you can see here, the tax breakdown. For the purpose of here, we are accepting the tax, but you can choose also to reject the tax if you do not agree. Once you finish with this, you can save and back to overview. The overview is just for you to make sure that you are proceeding with the rejection correctly. Again, it's a step because when we submit it, you cannot go back. So here the system made everything, all the calculation. We go back once. Here is the rejection memo. We go back again. And here is where we have the rejection invoice that has been created. We will validate it. Once validated, we will submit it. Before submitting, again, I would strongly suggest you see if you have everything correctly issued in order to avoid unnecessary rejection, and submit the invoice. Once the rejection has been submitted, now it immediately converts into your receivables because you converted a payable invoice to a receivable because you have rejected an amount of it. So you will find it in receivable, manage invoice in the current period. As you will see, it is here, ready for billing. Okay? So this is how you proceed with the rejection. Now that we have seen the rejection for passenger, only to show you that in miscellaneous is slightly different. So as I said before, in miscellaneous, you would start the rejection directly by clicking on the reject button. Okay. So now that we have finished the demo, I would like to remind you a few things about your payables. Your payable invoices can be searched and downloaded by billing category, as I showed. The offline archive files contain invoice PDF listing and supporting documents for all payable invoices, and you can search them by billing period. Pax and cargo rejection process is slightly different, as I showed you, from the miscellaneous process. And we strongly recommend you to engage with your invoicing partners on payable invoices before rejecting them in order to avoid unnecessary rejections. And finally, I would like you to invite you to reply to our third poll. What is your most frequently used method to retrieve, download, output files for payable invoices credit notes? Billing category payables invoice search, general file management download files, manual retrieval from IINet FTP, and automated retrievable from IINet FTP. Thank you for replying, and thank you for participating in this webinar today.
Thank you, Nina. With that said, we will present to you the third and final poll for today's webinar. On your screen now, you will be able to view the poll question. What is your most frequently used method to retrieve or download your payable invoices and credit notes? So from your perspective as a user, how do you go about downloading or retrieving your payable invoices? Is it via ISWeb, the respective billing category payable screen? Is it via ISWeb, the download file screen? Is it via manual retrieval from your IINet accounts or FTP? Or is it an automated retrieval by your systems from IINet or an FTP? Please go ahead and enter your responses as you know best suits your organization's setup for this particular file or file management activity. We do have just over 50% of you voted. Thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and close this poll now. Thank you for sharing your responses. On your screen, you would see that most of you all responded with you going to the billing category payables screen directly to retrieve your payables. As Nina mentioned, you can do this easier at the end of each billing period and download the offline archive files from your download file screen to retrieve all invoices for that billing period, if that will save you time. as well as if you are connected to INET or an FTP, these files will be pushed to your INET account from SIS for you to retrieve. So thank you for sharing your responses on that. I do know that we're a bit behind time, but we have one last segment to go through with everyone. Please, we will continue with this last segment before we end today's webinar. Thank you very much again for your time, Sam.
Thank you very much, Nina. And as we move on to the last part of the webinar, we would like to bring the discussion to the correspondence and billing history pages found in all billing categories. While there are some slight differences between the billing categories, they're all generally the same. So a couple of key points for the correspondence and billing history. It's a great tool for payable and receivable invoice search, search for and reply to correspondences, view and download audit trail and PDF with supporting documents, and you may initiate billing memos for packs and cargo or correspondence invoice for miscellaneous. So before we jump into a live demonstration, a couple of key points I'd like to start off with. First being the pathway. To get to where you need to go, it's home to a particular billing category you're interested in, and billing history and correspondence. Once pressed, you will see the search screen. When you do decide to search different things, you get various results. So there are different action icons that are displayed, which you can see on the left side of the screen. And for the invoice search results, the actions include view audit trail and show details. For the correspondence search results and actions, you get to see the view audit trail, show / pay correspondence, and open correspondence invoice. These will be looked at a little further down. Lastly, we're going to get to see the audit trail. The audit trail it shows the life of the invoice from initiation, rejections, correspondence, and the concluding billing memo. It's a great tool to get a history of the invoice in question, and this can be downloaded as a PDF as well with supporting documents for audit purposes. And as per the purchasing policy indicated in Chapter 8.9 of the ISPG, these audit trails do have a limited lifetime after they are concluded. So if needed, you may download them. So let's jump into a live demonstration of SIS on a couple of key points I want to discuss. So to start, let's look at the pathway. This is a SIS homepage, and to get to billing history correspondence, you go to the top of the page over the billing category of your choice, whether it be passenger, cargo, miscellaneous, or UATP. Now, for this example, we're going to be using miscellaneous. So we go here and press the second button, which is billing history correspondence. Once pressed, we get to the search screen. Now we're going to look at the first part, which is the invoice search criteria. So here, there's a few mandatory fields that you can interact with, such as the billing type, the time, whether it be billing year and month, the billing period associated with that time, the particular member code you're interested in looking at, and then there's some more niche drop-downs you can select to refine your search, whether it be charge category or the rejection stage. If you do have the invoice number, you can also pop it in the invoice number box as well to refine your search even more. Once you have all the appropriate things in, you can press the search button. And for example, I'll do it here right now. When you press search, the screen loads up, and then in the search results at the bottom of the screen, you're going to have all your results with a few action icons as well. There's two different action icons over here, one being the audit trail and the other one being show details. We're going to start off with the audit trail. When you press the audit trail, this screen opens up, which shows the audit trail. Now, as I said, it shows the life of the invoice, where the beginning to the end. And in this particular example, this invoice is still at stage 0, as it is a new invoice. And there are some key items here to look at, such as the billing period, the invoice number, the invoice date, etc. Now, this can be downloaded for audit purposes. And if you so choose to download, like I have just done here, I decided to include supporting documents, and it will show up on the screen to be able to download. And when it's open, you can interact with it, scroll down and see what there is. For my particular example, there is no attachment, as it's a erroneous invoice, but it would be downloadable from here. Now, moving on to the next icon would be the show details. Once this is pressed, you get to see this particular search screen. Now, unlike the audit trail, this one is not as interactive. as it's for viewing purposes only. So you can get a good breakdown of the invoice in question, and you can even look as far as the line items as well. Now, we were going to go into the back into the PowerPoint to take a look at the correspondence, because these are erroneous profiles and erroneous invoices, so there are no correspondences to them. But prior to doing that, I want to take a quick look at the actual search criteria. So first, the mandatory search criteria would be the dates. The to and from is via date and not via billing period. And then you have the correspondence status, which is mandatory as well, where there would be open, closed, or expired. Then at your own choosing, you can decide to refine it even more. You can choose, as I said, the invoice status, but then go to the substatus, whether it be received or saved. You can choose the different status of authority to bill. You can refine the correspondence owner, initiating member, number of days to expiry, the particular charge category, and or the member you're searching for. The most refined you can do is when an correspondence is created, you would get a correspondence number, and you can go back to here and put it in this box to search for a particular correspondence. Now that I've explained generically what the search is, let's jump back into the presentation and look over some screenshots of what you would see when interacting with different correspondences. So, as we got to see in the first half of this, the search criteria, and in the second half, what we didn't get to see are some search results. So, as a quick reminder, what a correspondence is. It begins once the rejection cycle is over and the dispute on the billing is not settled. The entity receiving the last rejected invoice can initiate a correspondence to pursue the case further. The process of correspondence is managed via IS Web, and this is the only medium available to the billing and billed entities to communicate. There is currently no limit on the number of iterations of correspondence between the billing and billed entity. However, each correspondence has a time limit for action to be taken on. The time limit for correspondence is governed by the rules of the individual clearinghouse. When a correspondence is initiated for the first time, SIS generates a unique correspondence reference number for the same. Any subsequent correspondence will continue with the same correspondence reference number. Now, if you want more information on this, you could consult the ISBG, but for the relevant billing category. Now, I want to bring everyone's attention to the screenshots on the screen. So as we got to see, we filled out the mandatory search criteria, and now we have our results. So on the left, we have actions that can be taken via icons, and on the right, we have different statuses. And I would like to take everyone to take a look at the different statuses. So under correspondence status, we have open, expired, and closed. And under correspondence substatus, we have responded and due to expired. Now, the reason I want everyone to take a look at these, because depending on these statuses and the authority to bill, the actions displayed on the left side can change. So the actions we get to see here are audit trail, show and create correspondence, and the correspondent invoice. So let's take a look what happens when we open up these actions. So from the search results, the blue icon, the correspondence invoice. Once pressed, you can view a correspondence in progress with this screen and the breakdown of what's going on. Some key areas for this are the to and from, the charge category, amount to be settled, authority to bill, etc. Lastly, there are a few buttons you may interact with at the bottom, such as download PDF, some attachments, and close correspondence. Note when you close this correspondence, it concludes this correspondence, but without settlement. So if you want to close it without settlement, this is the button you would press. But if you so choose to bill for settlement, you have this screen that shows up on the other icon you got to see. From the search results, for those who remember, the green icon, which is show/create correspondence invoice. When you have the authority to bill or a correspondence expires, IS Web will allow the user to issue a billing memo. Billing memos are for packs and cargo, or a correspondence invoice for miscellaneous only, in order to settle the correspondence. Now, when that is done, this screen pops up and particular boxes are auto-filled, and then you can fill out the rest of the corresponding invoice depending on what's needed. Once complete, you can save the invoice. Now, as we conclude this section and the webinar, just a couple of things I'd like everyone to remember on correspondence and billing history. First, the use of billing history and correspondence modules to search for specific transactions when needed, including to help resolve validation errors. Correspondence must be managed by ISWeb only. The entity receiving the last rejection invoice can initiate a correspondence. When an authority to bill is given or when correspondence expires, the other entity can issue a billing memo or correspondence invoice to settle. Lastly, consult the appropriate chapter of the ISBG for the relevant billing category. Now, as we close, I'd like to remind everyone of all the great documents and resources available on the SIS website for support that is needed. And a big reminder that for more descriptive, for screenshots and explanations of interacting with ISWeb, the user guide has all the information needed, and it's the first step that one should go to if you're a little confused of how to interact with ISWeb. There's also the other categories such as documents, and you can see past webinars as well, such as this one. And as we end the webinar, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we will end by answering some questions.
Thank you very much, Sam. With that, we have come to the end of today's webinar. We thank everyone for joining us on today's session. We will take a quick look if we do have any questions at this time. I will ask my colleague Nina. I do believe we did not receive any questions. Nina, did we have any questions that we need to answer?
No, Vivek, we didn't have any question to answer.
Okay. That's perfect as I see as well on my side. Therefore, please do not expect, I guess there will not be any question and answer report to this webinar. Thank you all for paying attention to today's webinar. It seems that it was very beneficial to everyone that paid attention. We do hope that you all received some valuable inputs from today's webinar that you can take back with you into your business units and apply. Of course, as always, we do invite you to submit your cases, questions, queries, any of the above that you need help or assistance with to the IATA customer portal. Please log your cases through the customer portal, chat with us, give us a call at IATA, and we'll be glad to assist you with any of the issues that you may be facing or questions that you may have for us, even including what we covered in today's webinar. So thank you all very much again for joining us. We do apologize for being a bit late, and until we see you again on the next webinar, please stay safe and take care wherever you may be. Thank you all. Goodbye.